Okay, we're going to give him his formal introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we're presenting for your listening pleasure and information pleasure a man who needs no introduction, a man who knows how to handle a bean pie. He's one of my favorites. But without any further ado, the communicators with Brother Leroy.
And this is East Harlem Community Radio on Tuesdays, but on Sundays it's the Grant Houses Community Radio. And the communicators program does not reflect the views, attitudes, whims, or any other proclivities of the management of the resident association here at Grant Houses, nor does the opinions and insights on this program reflect anything on the part of the management of the NYCHA development. However, this program does reflect the research done by the participants in the program live and live in color in studio and by phone interview. And we're very happy to have with us a young lady who has carved out a segment of the health industry. And when I say the health industry, I'm talking about those individuals who are looking for information to verify thoughts, ideas, and just get clarification. She does a tremendous job with her own program that airs on Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And without further ado, we're very happy to have with us Dr. Jennifer Daniels. God bless you, young lady. Can you hear me? Okay, maybe the volume. Hold on, Doc. I'm looking at this.
You didn't cut her off, did you?
I hope not.
Yeah. Well, turn the volume up. Put it on speaker.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay. In the meantime.
You think I might have a story? Because I grew up in the Grand Houses. I grew up in the Grand Houses.
This is what
Put it down closer.
Dr. Daniels, we've invited you on the show today in order to get some understanding on vaping, what is called vaping, and also get the information that you shared on your show recently regarding the procedures where they do examinations of the colon and other parts of the body, the tubes that they use. And if possible, towards the end of the program, talk about the AIDS drugs that are out here and what they are known to do and what they are known not to do. So we start with vaping. What is it that the public doesn't know that they could know with research?
First of all, what is vaping? Because you might have a lot of listeners who self-donate. Maybe their children or grandkids are vaping. So that would be important to know what is vaping. So vaping is simply inhaling from vapors, which is where the vaping comes from. usually from a necklace and historically, it has been used as for smoking. And because the vaping instrument looks like a pen or a cigarette, they've been termed e-cigarettes. Although you can put anything, any liquid can go in a vaping instrument. So so what happens is you have a little electrical spark that goes off. It's sometimes called e-cigarettes, and it creates a vapor which a person inhales. And you can vape essential oils, you can vape THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana. You can vape nicotine. You can vape, peppermint extract, all kinds of things. And so, what was happening back in 2008? Well, really before 2008. I became aware of it in 2008, though. But before 2008, people were actually switching from cigarettes to vaping, and they were quitting their cigarettes. And young people, teenagers, were vaping instead of smoking cigarettes. So this was a huge blow to the cigarette industry because they count on people starting cigarettes young, smoking for at least 20 years, and a pack a day. That's kind of pretty much the recipe. Wow. So if someone doesn't start smoking cigarettes before the age of 20, they usually aren't going to start. And so the smoking industry had a real problem. The other issue with vaping is that people could actually mix their own vaping liquids. So there wasn't any big money in vaping, as you can imagine. So what happened then was you said, well, if cigarette smoking is bad, then this is what the cigarette smoking people said, then vaping must also be bad. And therefore, vaping needs to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. And so under Obama, the Food and Drug Administration was given the authority to regulate vaping. Now, this is something that has been going on for years and years and years. No deaths, no problems. All the dangers in vaping prior to 2008 were just 100% imaginary. Well, imagine if you inhale something. Well, probably wouldn't be good. But, you didn't have people going to the emergency room. There were no health consequences of vaping. Okay. So then the FDA enters, and the FDA says, whoa. If anybody wants to sell a vaping, vaping liquid, then they have to get FDA approval. And they have to go through a process. And of course, the process costs several $1 million. And who could afford to go through that process? Who do you think? Who had the money? Pretty much the cigarette companies did. So what happened then, from 2008 until the present date, the vaping industry has been taken over by the cigarette industry.
Doc, go through that piece again. The maneuver that enabled the cigarette companies to take over vaping.
The cigarette companies went to the FDA and said, if inhaling anything is inherently dangerous, therefore you, the FDA, has to lobby, our elected leaders, who then said, you know what, that sounds good. We're gonna give the FDA authority to regulate vaping. And of course, the FDA had this big shoulder shrug, like, we don't know anything about vaping. And the only thing you need to know about vaping is that there was no medical consequence to vaping. So at the time that the FDA received jurisdiction of vaping, there had been no deaths documented. There had been, no harmful situations. Now, another piece of background, just from the cigarette position, there are no health consequences of smoking tobacco. But when the cigarette industry got involved, they put over 7,000 chemicals, toxic chemicals, into tobacco. And tobacco became a dangerous substance, which is now believed to be responsible for over 400,000 deaths a year in the United States. So what the FDA did was it created regulatory machinery that could only be navigated by the cigarette companies. And so what happened then is cigarette companies took over the vaping companies. Yeah, so the top 2 vaping companies are actually indirectly owned by cigarette companies.
Okay. All right. And
now, once this takeover took place, then we saw what might be expected, which is deaths from vaping. And so the FDA is like, oh my God, what happened? So of course they shut down everyone who was selling safe vaping supplies because these people didn't have the budget or financial wherewithal to satisfy the barriers put in place by the FDA in order to stay in business. And so some corporations who have a documented history of producing deadly, dangerous things basically then took over a totally harmless industry. And then over time, of course, as we can see, we're seeing the beginning of deaths from vaping.
Okay, let's go back a moment to the origin of vaping, because our connection wasn't that sharp.
Well, I don't know where the origin of vaping. I haven't gone that far back in history.
Okay.
So I'm only 60 years old. I'm sure vaping is hundreds of years old.
Okay.
It's simply inhaling vapors is all it is.
Okay. At the
When
point.
your mother heats up water on the stove and puts Vicks on it and you inhale it, you're vaping.
Okay. Okay. The part that we missed in your explanation is how it became a business. What aspect of it is? Where's the demarcation line between what was and the cigarette
And what
companies
is.
today?
Okay, so what was is people were mixing their own vaping solutions, were putting them into little things that looked like ink pens and hooking up little fancy batteries, and people were just, it was a cottage industry. People were just vaping. But what happened was so many people started vaping instead of smoking cigarettes. And so what happened was that young people, people age, 12 to 20, were deciding, hey, let me just vape instead of cigarettes. And with vaping, you can vape very pleasant things like cinnamon essential oil or peppermint essential oil. And so this really appealed to younger people. And they just vaped and they just never got around to smoking cigarettes.
Okay.
And so the cigarette people lobbied our government to turn over regulation of vaping, which was totally unregulated. Remember, it's totally unregulated, no deaths, no health consequences, to turn it over to the FDA. And we know the FDA is in charge of declaring safe a class of materials, call it pharmaceutical drugs, that kill, by the industry's own admission, 107,000 people a year, at least. And that's when properly prescribed. And so the FDA has a process, and with the process they create, it leads to very dangerous materials. Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, and I'm not necessarily saying there's any intervention needed, but this is the way it goes. A lot of people criticize drug companies. It only costs a penny to make a pill, and they sell it for $5. Well, if you have a situation like the FDA, where you can spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get a drug approved, and then maybe it'll sell, maybe it won't, like, oops, scrap that one, let's go another one, then, the cost of getting a drug to market is staggering. And then once you get it to market, the cost of marketing it, the bribes you have to pay to politicians to make the drug mandatory, the bribes you have to pay to get the legal system to convict a doctor of malpractice if he doesn't prescribe your drug. There's a whole infrastructure in place here, and everyone's got to get paid off in order for a drug to be a success. And so what happens then is you cannot put more than 1/1000th of your budget into the actual material cost of the product, call it the capsule or the pill. And so you've got to allow money for the marketing cost. You've got to allow money for the FDA approval, which more and more is looking like just a bribe process.
Mm-hmm.
So you pay money for FDA approval, all you're doing is paying to have an exclusive right to sell something and to have the courts prosecute anyone who tries to compete with you.
Mm.
So you're basically, when you go to FDA and get an approval of a drug, you're buying a monopoly.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's basically, it's just simply a straight up bribe, because they're approving. When I did a radio show on cholesterol drugs, could cholesterol drugs be a low value medical care? And the medical industrial complex itself, and if you read the package insert is really eye opening. The package insert, when you do the math, clearly states that it takes 16,667 years of use of a cholesterol drug before there is one beneficial event.
Wow.
Now, that promise is even more remote than the promise of Jesus coming back, all right? I mean, at least Jesus' promise is in the hereafter. At least it's only 100 years in the future.
Sister Daniels.
But to make a promise 16,000 years in the future.
You were cold, sis. You were cold. Sister Daniels, you give it straight with no chaser. God, sis. It's right on the package insert. That's what you're saying.
Well, no, you have to read it and you have to do the math and calculate.
Okay.
And most people, once you get past a few zeros, you lost them, right?
Yes.
I sat down with my handy-dandy calculator and worked out all the zeros. And this is something approved by the FDA. So the FDA approved a drug, which the drug company proved would be effective after 16,667 years of use.
Okay.
And who's got that kind of time? Even a health nut is not going to live much more than 110 years, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So go ahead, continue. I'm sorry, interrupt you.
So what I'm trying to say is getting FDA approval amounts to simply paying a bribe. It does not indicate something is safe. It does not indicate something is effective. But the price of the bribe is so high that the product being approved has to have certain characteristics. Like, first of all, number one, it cannot be effective, right? Because if it's effective, what's going to happen? Someone's going to use it, buy it, not have enough, boom, they won't keep buying it. You need a product they're going to need the rest of their life. Why? Because it's not going to work the first time, second time, or first year or second year they use it. And so with a vaping instrument, what are you looking for? Well, you're just looking for a pleasant experience, right? Just maybe inhale something and tastes like cinnamon, that's nice. Or even worse, the real reason people were vaping was it was something cool and interesting, and it wasn't cigarettes. So basically what has happened is the FDA has mediated a takeover by the cigarette companies of their competition.
Okay. All right. And the competition in this case are those cottage industries, cottage businesses that were in business before the cigarette companies saw vaping on the radar.
Correct.
Okay.
But so in 2008, which is around the time, which is when Obama signed the legislation, or the rule or legislation, whatever, giving FDA jurisdiction, because the FDA only has jurisdiction over drugs, right? And only over harmful, dangerous substances. Mm-hmm. And so vaping clearly was not harmful or dangerous, and so that's why the Obama had to sign something special to give them the jurisdiction.
Okay, very good.
Right. Now, these cottage industries, we say cottage, right? Because no, the industry uses the word cottage. But make no mistake, people were making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars selling vaping liquids and vaping supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And they were growing to the point where they were encroaching on basically the seed corn for the cigarette companies, which is basically your 12 to 20-year-old market. These people were saying, I'll just go vape. I forget cigarettes. Everyone knows cigarettes are dangerous. And so now what's happening is you have the same corporate structure which has converted cigarettes or tobacco, something pretty harmless, into a deadly substance, and they are now in the process of converting vaping, pretty harmless, into a deadly substance. And so what we have is these deaths from vaping.
The conversion from a harmless to a harmful, what's involved in that? The added chemicals, and explain
Correct.
that.
Right, it's added chemicals. Well, we can't explain it because that information has not been revealed.
Okay. But
Right, that
the
information
reaction,
has not been revealed.
the patients, the reactions of the consumers, the illnesses
Right.
give you indications of the kind of chemicals. Not when I say
Well, no. Let's be clear.
Okay.
There has been a partial list that has been released. A complete list has not been released of what all the chemicals are in these vaping whatevers. And the government is still in the process of investigating. So we just don't have the information.
Okay.
And you can't say, well, someone puked and then passed out, therefore it must be this thing that killed them.
Right.
There's just so many substances out there.
Okay.
So the answer is it is not yet known exactly what chemical caused the death. And I would suggest to you it's even irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, it's not safe to buy a commercial vaping supply. You can go on YouTube and Google do it yourself vaping, make your own vaping liquid.
Mm.
And in most states, needles and syringes are legal. So you can go into a vaping container, suck out what's in there, and put in the harmless stuff that you made, or you can wash it out.
Okay, so in terms
if you're going to vape.
I'm sorry.
If you are going to vape,
Right.
make your own vaping liquid.
Okay, so that would be a recommendation or for consideration on the part of parents and others.
No, parents are out of this. Forget this. Okay, you can. Hopefully, the kid is listening, right? The kid is going to listen to this and go make his own vaping stuff. He can go on YouTube and make up his own
Okay.
vaping liquid.
All right.
The parents have no involvement in this.
Okay.
If the parent makes a vaping liquid and says, "Here, Johnny, you can vape this liquid; it'll be safe," no, he's not going to use it.
You're absolutely correct. So that's the recommendation that you would make to the users. Just before we leave this segment.
Yeah, here it is: How to make your e-liquid. Best do-it-yourself vape juice guide. Yeah, and these are kids. What are they going to put in? Grape juice, cinnamon, walk around, look cool. Yeah, it's real nicotine. Well, there's nothing in there. So, this is just kids growing up, and they're turning it into a deadly experience.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and let's shove that to the side and talk about the use of scopes to examine different parts of the body. Would you share with us the information?
All right. So, yeah, you've used a lot of really big words here that public might not understand. We're talking about letting somebody in a white coat shove a big tube up your butt, all right? And I even used a nice word for butt.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
that is all it is. If you're walking down the street and someone tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, brother, let me shove this tube up your butt," what would you tell him?
Hey, there's a war going on.
But what would you tell him?
No.
Exactly. But we got sane adults, competent to handle their own finances, saying yes to a similar proposition. So, these tubes, this is no joke. These are tubes that are about, 3 to 6 feet long, a half inch to 1 inch wide, and they are being shoved up people's butts a long distance. And you can just imagine how comfortable that is. In fact, you should wince or even say, ouch, just thinking about it.
Exactly.
So when I was in medical school of 1979 to 83, they did it without anesthesia. You hear me? Without anesthesia. And they couldn't get anyone to go, not anyone, they couldn't get enough people to go along with it. So, and they couldn't train doctors well enough in the skill of how to rotate the tube to make it comfortable enough. So they sedate the person, sometimes even general anesthesia.
Okay.
And that made it more palatable, so more people went along with the situation. So now what they've done is they said, okay, fine, we got people to agree to shove this thing up their butt. And you can imagine the sales job they had to do to get people to agree or believe that this was something other than what it was, which is just sodomy. If someone shoved a broom handle up your butt, you wouldn't have any problem figuring out what that is, right?
That is correct.
That'd be pretty straightforward. Now, let's talk about the broom handle up the butt scenario. It's a broom handle. It's going up your butt. There is really no medical benefit to it health-wise. You might want that to happen. You might consent to it. You and your friends might work out an agreement or something, or maybe someone will do it forcefully against your will. But we can all agree there's no health benefit, right?
Well, don't they?
No, I'm talking about the broom up your butt.
Right, that is correct. No way.
No health benefit. Let's clear this. I mean, we have to get a foundation of understanding and language so we
Yes,
can
ma'am.
communicate here.
Good.
Okay, so if someone shoves a broom handle up your butt, we can all agree there is no health benefit.
Correct.
You are not going to live longer or happier or healthier because that broom handle is shoved up your butt.
Correct.
All right, got it. So we now have a similar implement, only now it's curved. It has fiber optics. It has a fat handle with knobs and things that twirl around. All right? Now that broom handle going up your butt, probably that broom handle has not been up someone else's butt. I think that's a reasonable thing to conclude.
Right.
Maybe it's been other places, but probably it was just a kind of a spur of the moment thing, and it's not like you got 6 people lined up and you're shoving it up each person's butt. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, with a colonoscopy, you do have 6 people lined up and you're shoving up each person's butt. And it is not cleaned in between.
What?
Oh, yeah. So in other words, you have a colonoscope at 10 a.m. It goes up somebody's butt and their intestines around and blah, 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 whatever. Whatever happens. We don't need the details. They pull it out. They put it in it's called a bath. That's a tub of liquid to soak in. And when I first saw colonoscopy, as a medical school, guy pulls this thing out and puts it in this big tub. And so I'm looking at that tub. And I said to him, hey, well, what's happening next? Someone get down there with a toothbrush and scrub this thing out? Oh, no. We can't do that. That instrument is too delicate. I said, well, what happens next? Oh, well, we delicately take it out of that bucket. And not the whole thing, mind you. The handle can't go in there because it's got all kinds of, wires and blah, blah, blah. It can't get wet. All right. So we move this tube from one bucket to the next bucket, and to the next bucket, and the next bucket. It might sit in buckets for about, a period of several hours. And that's it. Rinse it off. It does not even get the attention you give to your dinner plate. Let me just clarify washing dishes, right? You eat. There's food left on the plate. You run it under the water. You have a washcloth or something, and you wash it off on one side, and you wash it off on the other side with something soapy. Then you rinse it off.
Correct.
And you run your hand over to make sure you got all the soap off, no slime there, both hands, and then you dry it. Is that about right?
That is
Washing
correct.
a dish?
Yes.
That is correct. Okay. That is not what happens to your colonoscope. If you can imagine the same dish, you've got food on it. You take this dish, put it in soapy water, not even hot water, not hot water, it's a delicate dish, can't put it in boiling water, oh God, no. Put it in the solution. Lift it out, don't wash it, put it in another solution, let it sit there for a few hours. Pull it out, don't wash it, let it dry. And then you serve dinner to your guests tomorrow on the same plate. That's the way colonoscopes are cleaned. Yeah. So, you've got this contamination issue. You can Google it. It's a scandal. The people's health is being destroyed by this so-called test. Okay, so now we've got this very big negative situation going on, right? In other words, that you are basically eating the poop from the last umpteen people who had this thing shoved up their butt.
Right.
Let's say, what's going on when this thing's shoved up your butt? What do they find? And then if they find it, whatever they find, what's the intervention? And is the intervention effective for improving your health over had they done nothing? Right?
Yes. Go ahead.
So the answer is no. It is as beneficial as shoving a broomstick up your butt.
Doc, the reasons that they give us for the colonoscopy is to pick up any indications of cancer in the colon. At least that's what I understand.
That's true. Okay, so let's say you're talking to your girlfriend, and she's looking for any indications that you might marry her. Any indications that you might marry her. What is the probability of any one indication indicating that you're actually going to marry her?
Well, that would have to be a big indicator.
That's your opinion. She's looking for any indication.
Any indication.
Any indication. Oh my God, he asked me out a second time. Did you see that text? So the medical industrial complex is telling you the truth. They're looking for any indication. And a lot of the indicators are actually false. Unreliable.
When they do the colonoscopy and they see polyps,
Correct.
give an assessment on that. They would say, well, this is why we
Most of
went
the
in.
polyps would never have ever progressed to cancer, number one. Number two, most of the polyps would have detached themselves and fallen out if the person just pooped more often and changed their diet.
Wow.
So the research now shows that there's no indication that removing polyps every year or every 2 years or every 5 years prevents cancer. Why? Because the cancerous polyps, boom, they show up, they grow, and they get you in like 6 months or less. So getting an annual colonoscopy and getting all of your polyps removed is not going to prevent cancer.
Okay. All right.
So then, what is a colonoscopy? It is a cultural ritual. Just like child sacrifice, just like circumcision, it's simply a cultural ritual. You gotta decide what temple you want to worship at and what ritual you want to engage in. I mean, it's just like Christmas or the Easter bunny. If you want to buy Easter bunnies, that's fine. It is not a problem. But for me to tell you have to buy Easter bunny for your health, well, we've crossed the line, haven't we?
When one says it's a cultural habit, is that? I didn't write it down.
I said ritual.
Ritual. When one says that, then it ties into other things.
Like what?
Well, it ties into a philosophy that would promote such, and that it's not just a medical procedure that was developed by some scientist or whatever.
Absolutely, nothing scientific about it. They developed the practice first and then looked for the science later, which has yet to show up.
Okay. Now, the scope that they use, you pointed out that the probability of being used among a number of patients is very high.
It's not probability. The scope costs $35,000. They're not going to use it once.
Okay. Okay.
And disposable scope is $15,000. You do the math on that one.
Now, are those scopes used for any other part of the body?
There are similar scopes used, and so obviously, depending on which hole you're invading, the size and length of the scope has to vary.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, just to make this really clear, Wikipedia has helped us out in this. A ritual are features of all known human societies. They include not only the worship rites and sacraments of organized religions and cults, C-U-L-T-S, but also rites of passage, atonement, and purification rites, oaths of allegiance, dedication ceremonies, coronations, and presidential inaugurations, marriages, funerals, and more. So really, the colonoscopy can fall into a rite of passage. I can't tell you the people I've heard say, well, 50 years old, gonna schedule my colonoscopy.
Right.
It's literally a rite of passage.
Right.
And people perceive it as purification. It's going to take out those evil polyps. So this has nothing to do with being healthy. But again, everything to do with this is just a cultural ritual.
Man.
And so what you have to do is decide what cultural rituals you want to engage in.
Got it.
Okay, so why are cultural rituals important? Dr. Google helps us with this one too. They help form the structure and foundation of society. It contributes a sense of comfort and belonging. I got my colonoscopy. Did you get yours?
Mm.
Then it enables people to reconnect with each other and with friends. So this is all that's happening. Is you're preserving a social structure to the society. People are getting a sense of comfort and belonging.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay. Now. Okay. All right. We're clear on that. And the next area is AIDS drugs. The ones that give us an overview of the advent of AIDS drugs and where it is today.
All right, so AIDS was invented.
Okay.
Totally invented. It was invented just like Santa Claus. Again, my favorite is the Easter Bunny. A Disney character or a Sesame Street character. So it was created, it was invented. So in other words, we can be clear, let's be clear, that there is no Easter Bunny. Easter Bunny is imaginary.
Yes.
Let's be clear that there is no big bird running around out there. It's imaginary.
Yes.
Okay, so any discussion about a virus, blah, 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 is nonsense because we're talking about an imaginary concept. A best analogy would be cooties. So when you were 10 years old, remember this game? Oh, you got cooties, I touched you, you got cooties. Oh, someone else got cooties, you got cooties, you got cooties. It's just like that. There is no virus, and it's not contagious. The only way to get AIDS is to believe you have AIDS. It is not sexually transmitted. How do I know it's not sexually transmitted? I mean, how do I personally know? The sexual partners of HIV positive people have a lower incidence of HIV positivity than the general population. So if it was sexually transmitted, at least the sexual partners of HIV positive people would have a higher frequency of the disease than the non-partners. That's not the case. The frequency of HIV positivity among partners of HIV positive people is only 2% of the rate of the disease in the general population. So that tells me, for sure, it is not sexually transmitted. They even did a test, an experiment. They used prostitutes who were HIV positive. You can only do this test in Africa.
Okay.
So it's test these prostitutes who are HIV positive. They tested all of their johns before the prostitute had sex with them, and they followed these johns, and they tested these customers. I don't know, about a year later or something like that. The conversion rate was 1 in 3,000. The HIV positivity rate in the United States is 1 in, I think, 250 it is. You can look it up, but it's a lot less than 1 in 3,000. So And that same frequency is seen in the United States as well. If you have an HIV positive person and they have sex with a whole bunch of HIV negative people, those people do not convert. So we know for sure it is not sexually transmitted. That's, you know, we've, you know, you gotta. So that's one piece of information. It's not sexually transmitted. And if it's not even sexually transmitted, you have to say it's not even contagious. And if it's not contagious, then viral transmission cannot be part of the spread of the disease.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, way back when I was in medical school, dark ages, AIDS was defined as a T cell count, I believe, below a certain number. So T cell count below a certain number, tiredness, and a rash called Kaposi sarcoma. And this rash called Kaposi sarcoma was raised, blotchy. The blotches were generally 1 to 3 inches by 1 inch, and that was the definition of AIDS. That's it. Those two things: blotchy rash, purplish blotchy rash, not a red one, and a low T4 cell count. Now, fast forward. Symptoms of AIDS. Oh, and you could get infections easily.
Right.
And that was it. That was the whole. That was the whole AIDS complex. And who had AIDS? There's only two groups: people who had received chemotherapy and homosexuals. So if you said, well, it's a disease of chemotherapy, it'd be pretty tough to sell chemo, wouldn't it?
Right, exactly.
So they decided, let's pin it on the homosexuals. Now, remember, the only symptoms of AIDS: blotchy rash and low T4 cell count. That was it. But now it says, well, you can get fever, chills, night sweats, muscle aches, sore throat, tiredness, swollen lymph nodes, and mouth ulcers. These are new symptoms that they added. Oh, now you can get memory loss, depression, and neurologic disorders. Now, the important thing about this and the sores is that these are actually side effects of the medications used to treat AIDS. So as they convinced people to take these AIDS drugs, then the symptoms that showed up as a result of the drugs became incorporated into the disease definition.
So we need to administer more of these drugs in order to counter what we're seeing. That is, this is what their dialogue is. These indicators.
Oh no, the dialogue is better than that. Okay, you have, this person has no symptoms. They have a positive test. They decide to take drugs. Oh my God, memory loss showed up. Sure enough, see, we told you you had AIDS. We better add a second drug. Oh, you got some sores popping up. Yep, it's AIDS. We got to add a third drug. Oh my goodness, it's just like we told you. You got it. So basically, they're creating the disease that they say you have from the drugs they're giving.
So when you look at an AIDS, a person on AIDS drugs, and their weight is going down.
Right.
You're saying right.
It's from the drugs they're taking.
And it also can lead to there's a question.
Death.
Definitely the need for oxygen, where they put the tube in your nose, you're basically mobile.
Oh yeah, that's just a piece of trauma. but it destroys your whole body. Now here is what this is the HIV.gov site. Listen carefully. And they're telling you, ask for an HIV test for recent infection. And it says HIV tests detect antibodies, proteins your body makes as a reaction to HIV, not HIV itself. So the tests for HIV do not measure the virus. This is an important thing to get a grip on. At no point is the virus measured. So how can I tell you got AIDS if I haven't even isolated the body? How can I say you have a virus if I haven't even isolated the virus from your body?
Okay, just take us back to a classroom. When I say a classroom, that what you're explaining, the foundation of understanding that goes to a explanation or a teaching on that, where you say isolate the viral. Just go through that.
All right, so there's something called conscious postulates. So way back when, there was something called voodoo, witchcraft. And so the question was, how can you make something objective so that you can't have just some priest point to someone and say, you are cursed, take him away and kill him, right? Or you have got the disease, you're banished from the kingdom because we don't want you to spread it to anyone else. Okay, so how can we have a scientific way of determining if a person really has a disease, if that disease is contagious, and what exactly is the cause of that disease?
Mm-hmm.
So we have, for this purpose, conscious postulates. You can Google it, Koch, K-O-C-H, conscious postulates. So Koch said, look, and he made it strict. He said, first of all, if the person has something that can spread to everyone else, it must be an infectious organism, a living organism in their body that's causing the disease, and that living organism is transmitted to other people on contact. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't know what kind of contact. The kind of contact is not important. Okay. So in order for this to be the case, that living organism, we'll call it a virus, has to be present in such sufficient and large quantities as to cause the disease. So you can't, if it's present in a minuscule amount, then it can't possibly be the cause of the disease.
Right.
Okay. So it's got to be there in abundance, number one. Number two, it must be that the organism, in this case called the virus, has been isolated and grown in culture. Number three, that organism grown in culture, when injected in other people who are healthy, must make them sick. Yeah, he didn't stop there. Once that person becomes sick, it must be possible to isolate that very same organism from that sick individual and show that it's identical to the first organism that was injected. None of these things are true of the HIV virus. None.
So going back when the test
Then you say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, so I was in medical school. Well, we'll raise my hand. Excuse me. With AIDS, we haven't satisfied conscious postulates. And what they told me, don't worry. You graduate. You treat, AIDS. No, your family practice. You refer AIDS to the infectious disease specialist. And conscious postulates will be satisfied in the future going forward. Don't you worry about it. I said, okay. So whenever someone had an HIV positive test, I sent them to the infectious disease guy, and I didn't really think much about it until I said, let me take a look into this little AIDS thing. How many, because I was in New York State, how many people are dying from it? How contagious is it? How many times do you have to have sex with an HIV positive person in order to catch the disease? Well, first year they said 300. Then it finally got up to 3,000. I said, holy cow! You can have unprotected intercourse with your spouse in a 10-year marriage, and most people would not catch this disease because they wouldn't have sex often enough. And most marriages weren't lasting 10 years anyway. And if you have to have sex with someone 3,000 times in order to catch AIDS, The best protection is promiscuity. Oh, I ain't having sex with you more than 5 times because, I got the AIDS limit. I don't want to catch AIDS. I know I got to have sex with you 3,000 times to catch AIDS. So we're just going to cut this off at, 10 or 20 times to have sex with a person. So promiscuity, based on the sexual contact numbers, is your defense against AIDS. If you need to have sex with an HIV positive person 3,000 times in order to catch it, then the last thing you want is a committed long-term relationship with anybody, for that matter.
Okay.
So what's happened with AIDS, since they're making it up as they go, the facts about the disease do not comport with the recommended cultural behaviors. So how are you going to get a man to use condoms with his wife? Well, declare one of them HIV positive. How are you going to get people to have less sex and not reproduce? Well, tell them they can get deadly AIDS and die of it. So the government, every government, tries to control its citizens. And as complicated as you think people can be, it's very simple. All you need to control about a person is if they reproduce, decide who reproduces and who doesn't. When they have offspring, the offspring belong to the government, and all the fruits of the person's labor belong to the government. That's all you need, those 3 things. And part of getting that control is to get people to engage in behaviors that do not result in reproduction.
Right.
So you want people to use birth control, you want them to use condoms, have only one partner, and if you only have one partner, sometimes you're not on good terms. Well, no sex tonight. So you have to put all these things in place. You have to be married before you have sex. The more conditions you place on it, the less likely it is to ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you make sure that when it does happen, everyone is sterile, then who's in charge of reproduction? The government. But AIDS is the roundabout way to introduce that control. That's really all it is.
Okay, let's go back to the AIDS test or the HIV test. That
Right.
is, my understanding, is called a false positive. Would you explain that?
Okay, it's a positive when a test shows you have something. What the HIV test tests for is for proteins made by the human body. So the proteins made by the human body, they're detected in the HIV test, are randomly distributed throughout the population. There are people who make these proteins.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get an AIDS test, you're basically you're submitting to a random number generator. It's just going to randomly label people as being positive. And the way they controlled the epidemic was they only tested black people, or they only tested people who were arrested and then put in prisons. We were given, as doctors, instructions, do not test married, white, suburban people for AIDS. Don't do it. If this is a married, white, suburbanite female, don't test her for AIDS. If the test comes back positive, ignore it. And so from the beginning, the whole AIDS testing was a method of political control to label undesirable people in the population. Basically, it's homosexuals, people who have been arrested by the police or who are incarcerated, and minorities. Now what they're doing is people have been kind of desensitized to AIDS or whatever, and so now they're rolling it out, say, okay, we're going to test everyone in the population for AIDS. What's going to happen is you're going to have 80-year-old ladies who've only had one sex partner their whole life testing positive for AIDS. Where the heck did it come from? Whoa, that husband who's dead must have been HIV positive. No, that's not very scientific, is it? Dead men can't speak up for themselves. So you're going to find couples where one is HIV positive and one is not HIV positive, and they've been sexually together for years, they've been having babies, and there's been apparently no transmission of this vile disease or situation. And so now they're saying, well, okay, so you could be HIV positive and have no symptoms for 20 years, and then the virus just suddenly decides to wake up and just take over your body and kill you. Is that voodoo or what? In other words, if the virus was causing the disease, then it would cause the disease. So if the virus stays dormant for 20 years and then all of a sudden wakes up and gives you a problem, then there must have been an event that happened at year 20 that caused the sickness. The virus is always there. So the virus could not possibly be the cause of the sickness. It must be, the cause had to be the event that occurred at 20 years that woke the virus up. So what was that event? I don't know. And again, it doesn't matter. What does matter is the present story as to what is AIDS is simply false. There's no evidence that it's true.
So we come back, not come back, but we go over to the track of the drugs that are used, prescribed now. AZT, from what I understand, was first a cancer drug, and they put it on the shelf because it wasn't effective in that. And then when AIDS comes...
I think before that it was an antibiotic. And it was so deadly as an antibiotic, they made it a cancer drug.
Wow.
And so the way it works is we were told in medical school, cancer drugs are deadly and they kill people, but cancer itself is a deadly disease that it's okay to give deadly drugs because people are going to die anyway.
Wow. Okay. So,
now,
go ahead.
The other thing about AZT to remember is, so AZT came, well, I won't say came out, it was applied to AIDS in the 80s. And so we were told, I graduated from medical school in 83, AZT is going to save the world, it's going to stop the epidemic. Oh, thank God. So of course they did a nice little test about 1 year or so, and it showed that people who took AZT survived. They had a lower death rate in the first year or two. But then somebody did some follow-up and found out that at year 3, the people taking AZT died in greater numbers, and actually not taking AZT gave you the longest lifespan. So in other words, it's an extermination drug. And so the AIDS drugs, first of all, the disease does not exist, okay? Can we let's just be clear.
Okay.
So if you give this AIDS test to, 1 million people, you're going to have a bunch of positives. Of the positives, most of them will have no symptoms and they'll feel perfectly fine. So what you're testing for is you're testing for a protein in people's blood, a protein created by human bodies. Now the meaning you attach to the protein is your own business, but the test is test for a human protein which is randomly distributed among human beings regardless of their health or not. And so once you have a positive test, the next question is, are you going to take drugs? And that's a personal decision.
Right.
Kind of like the colonoscope,
Yeah, exactly.
And again, we're back to our little rite of passage. This whole HIV testing and treating is a method of social control. And you can think of it as a method of even social extermination. Because who are you going to exterminate? You're going to exterminate the gay people, the first group they decide to test and treat. Now you're going to kill people who are the prison population, test them and treat them. And now they're going to say, well, let's roll it out to everybody. And you can control this by who you decide to test. So who you decide to test is going to be the population that's going to be preferentially decimated or killed.
Exactly. Okay. So, just review with us the impact of those drugs on the body, the ones that they administer for AIDS.
They destroy your immune system, they destroy your kidneys, destroy your heart, they create diabetes, they create wasting. It's nothing good. So these are very damaging drugs. And people who die of AIDS, it is likely that what they are dying of is the drugs they're taking.
Now, the drugs that they're taking, based on your knowledge, not your intricate knowledge of it, but let's say someone who has been taking these drugs hears this program, hears this dialogue.
Right. So
First,
what they need to do, what they can do is, no one's inside their body, so no one can speak for them. But they need to get off the drugs. And the question is, how do they get off the drugs? The answer is some people can just walk away, just stop the drugs, and that's it, they're done. And they do just fine. Other people, when they stop the drugs, they have a bad reaction. And that's because their body has reconfigured its metabolic processes to survive with the drugs in place. And those people would need to taper their drugs, improve their diet, eat food that doesn't have chemicals in it, eat food that's not processed, drink purified, clean water. And that's basically what needs to be done. But there is no, the AIDS thing, we'll call it, doesn't exist. The disease, a disease caused by a virus that destroys the immune system, it just doesn't exist. There are immune systems that have been destroyed by drug use. In the in the gay population, it was the use of poppers. There are immune systems that are destroyed by processed foods, all kinds of things. But immune systems being destroyed by a virus, there is no documented case of that. There are immune systems that are compromised, due to lifestyle choices or exposure to poisons or whatever, that are then more susceptible to infections. But that situation being caused by a virus does not exist.
Okay. All right.
And you might say, wait, Dr. Hans, what about the flu? We're all getting the flu shot.
That, Doc, that was my next question.
Mind reader, right?
Go with your psychic self.
The number of people in the United States, we got to understand, we have at least 330 million people in the United States, I believe. The death toll from the flu, documented deaths, is 18. Negligible. Documented deaths from the flu shot is actually pretty high. Much higher. It's thousands.
Damn.
So, again, we have a slow kill program going on.
Well, a guy...
Like blacks say, they're just trying to kill blacks. No, they got white folks taking the flu shot too.
Exactly. The a guy asked me if, this is years ago, he asked me if I was going to have a flu shot at the company that we worked at. I told him, no way. So he said, why? I said, man, they give you the flu in order for it to create antibody. They give you the flu in order for you not to get the flu. Now, I said, you figure that one out. So he said, well, I did get a shot last year and I got very sick. So I said, you going to take the flu shot again? He said, yeah.
Yeah.
Rites of passage, right?
Cultural ritual.
And
you need to understand that. It's very powerful. Because people have these cultural rituals to determine who belongs, who doesn't belong. And people who don't belong, they are ostracized. They're denied certain privileges and rights.
Right.
If you have a job and they tell you to take a flu shot to keep your job, you know your job is unimportant. And you are unimportant. You've just been devalued. You might as well quit your job right now. You got troubles bigger than the flu. But the point is, with these social rituals and sacraments, and oaths of, essentially like an oath of allegiance or a dedication ceremony, they decide, okay, you're going to get a job. Okay, you get to go to school. You get to go to preschool. You get to play sports. You don't get to do this. So what's happening is our society using medicine and people's belief in medicine is creating nothing more than, a social control, social ritual process that's arbitrary, capricious, and really no different than what may have happened, 500 or 1,000 years ago, in prehistoric times, or with the Mayan culture. If you don't take your firstborn kid and sacrifice him by throwing him into the fire, then you're not part of the community, and you don't get to share in the crops and the irrigation and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, we just got to plan to have 6 kids. First one goes in the fire.
Okay, in terms of, in concluding, Dr. Jennifer Daniels, please give the websites where folks can connect with information on you, and also the vital capsules, etc.
Okay. So my website is vitalitycapsules.com, and you can get Vitality capsules. You can get a free report on the healing properties of turpentine, and you can contact me as well.
Okay, and this is a question relating to, you might be able to answer this, relates to the hybrid or the foods that you see with a 3 on it, the 3,000 category. It's
genetically modified organisms. GMO
exactly.
foods.
Why would they? I see it on papayas in New York, that label. What we understand.
Why would someone make a genetically modified food?
Papaya, especially.
Oh, no. You're losing track of the forest for the trees. You're focusing on the trees, and you're missing the big picture here. So as I said with the FDA, the FDA gives the company a monopoly.
Okay.
When it approves a drug, that company has a monopoly.
Right.
So genetically modified foods, the company making them has a monopoly. So if you buy a papaya from the store, it's genetically modified, and you grow the seed and it grows papayas, then you are violating a monopoly the government gave to that food company or to the seed company. And you can be arrested, you can be made to pay fines, you have to pay retributions to that company for that papayas growing in your backyard. So it's all about having a monopoly on the food supply.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Young lady, thank you very much for your sharing with us, and it's invaluable. Also, your program on Sundays. How do people access your show?
So it's now a podcast, and so it shows up on Vimeo, 10 a.m. Eastern Time every Sunday, 10 a.m. on Vimeo, 10 a.m. on Facebook, and 10 a.m. on YouTube.
And
so it's distributed to those 3 channels right at the moment.
What about the archive of your shows?
The archives are available at vitalitycapsules.com. You click on the button that says podcast,
Gotcha.
and you can see all the archives. We have over 350 shows archived.
Very good. Thank you very much, young lady. God bless you and your family.
Okay, you're welcome. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.